Hello, welcome back to the No Way Jose podcast. Today I have Matt Wolfson joining us. I believe this will be our first and what's I think going to be maybe a weekly series of some sort. I'm calling it, I think, at least for now, I think we might stick with it, the weekly Wolfson. And I think the idea will be these will go out on Wednesdays to keep with the alliteration for the patrons, and we'll probably maybe drop them like on the weekends or something for the public. And as always, the patrons, you guys are welcome to join us live. Just a reminder. But yeah, we'll be talking about some of the pieces Matt's covered each week. This week we'll be talking about some Gaza and some UAE stuff. Now, if you like what you hear here, be sure to hit the subscribe button and hit that bell for notifications so you can tell when I'm live, when I'm dropping new episodes. And you can find Matt's work over at oppo-research.com. We'll see you in the...
No way, Jose.
The following footage proves beyond any doubt that the tanks intentionally set the house on fire. It proves that the Branch Davidians were murdered. You can see that this tank has a gas jet on the front that shoots fire. You can also see the fire quite plainly. The tank goes into the house twice, and each time as it backs out, the fire at the gas jets is plainly visible.
We must all do more to recognize and look for the early warning signals that deeply troubled young people send.
Hey Matt, welcome back to the show. It hasn't been too long. I put out so much content that I was thinking about. I was trying to remember what day it was. I know it was very recently, but I put out too much content to remember what day I had you on last. But it was very recently. But we kind of teased this series on our last appearance together. So it's fun to make it a reality, calling this the Weekly Wolfson. But it's a pleasure to have you here, Matt. We'll be talking about kind of whatever you've put out for the past week. Because, you dig into some interesting topics and you give it its due credit. So I figured, hey, why not? And it's stuff I love, so why not do it weekly? You're here for it, I'm here for it. So a pleasure to have you with me.
Thank you. It's a pleasure to be here, and I'm grateful to be on. Thank you so much.
Mm-hmm. It's a pleasure to finally get to pull back that old intro. For those who've been with the channel for a while, it's good to bring that one back. That's a fun one. I need to get Liam Cosgrove and Madam Fitzgerald back on, and it's been a while since I've had them. It's good seeing the old one. Liam's out there doing big stuff. I don't know. He's another journalist. I'm not sure if you're familiar with him. He's God, who's he's working for right now? Anyway, whatever. We're not here to talk about him. He's just, I know he's always in the, I think he's in like the White House press corps or something. So he's one of the ones that tends to give him some more saucy questions. So always love to give Liam some love. But anyways, Matt, we've got, this week you put out a couple, no, not this week. I guess one of them was from a little bit earlier. One was you just dropped right in the wire today. So we have Gaza's piece to talk about and the UAE piece. We talked a little bit. This is your follow-up UAE piece. We talked a little bit on the last morning dump that I had you on, which was like less than a week ago. I wish I could remember exactly what day it was, but whatever. You guys can look back. You'll figure it out pretty easily. It says Matt right in the title. But this is your follow-up, and the first one I know you went a little bit more into. It was kind of more the history of the state and some things along those lines. This one, I didn't. Full honesty, I only got like halfway through this because you just sent it to me a little bit late, so I only like read half of it. But this is seeming like getting more into kind of like the today stuff, some of the AI bubble. So probably actually a good place to start, since it's kind of almost like a natural follow up from the last time we talking about UAE. So we should probably go ahead and talk about that. So, like I said, I read the first half of it. I saw you kind of getting into some of the tech bubble, the AI popping stuff, which it's been something I've wanted to focus on the show a little bit, but I'm a bit of a tech idiot, and if anything, that's kind of why I've just never really bought too much into it. I mean, I use AI occasionally in my life, but I'm a little bit of a Luddite. So, but I have been aware that there is a lot of weird money games going on with AI, kind of, seemingly artificially boosted, if you will, especially with some of the insane money and the push from the federal government and hell, even some of the investments coming from these Gulf countries. So I don't know. You can kind of go wherever you want for this story if you want to intro. But I'll be honest. That's what I found particularly interesting. That this a lot of people are sleeping on that this current conflict we have over in Iran, which is kind of coming to a close. Maybe, I mean, everything changes, is in flux day to day. I don't know what the hell's going on by the time this drops. But that's kind of one of those sleeper issues where it looks like this conflict really may have screwed the pooch when it comes to our economy, since a lot of this is kind of really a speculative-based economy on where AI is going to go, and it doesn't look like it's really going to play out, and a lot of where the money's coming from, we just screwed over. So wherever you want to go with that.
Well, I couldn't ask for a better intro to that. I appreciate it. I think where I want to start is that I'm a Luddite too. I mean, I'm a writer, and I'm a traditional one. I mean, very traditional. I came up with books. And so I think in some ways our background helps to talk about this, because in my framing, the AI boom, which by some estimates, I think it's in the piece, and I think this number is right, makes up about 30% possibly of what amounts to our economy. It's not the GNP, but it's 30% of something. You can find it in the piece. It's essentially a defense boom. In other words, if you think about 1945, what started the military, what started the nuclear weapon, the hydrogen bomb, what started our deployments overseas and all these forts, I mean, what made the career you had for a period of time was intensive government investment in the economy, in the defense economy. And I think it's probably most effective, and that started in 1945 and sort of powered things through about 1985. The way I just finished another piece, and it's not out yet, but the way I talk about it is our first empire. 1945 to 1985, we got big on the world stage. We were fighting the Cold War. We took on all these colonial responsibilities from the European empires, from Britain and France. We had a huge army. We fought the Soviets, right? Starting in 1985, around 1985, Ronald Reagan's second term, as the Cold War began to wind down. That was the year of the first peace summit, that's when the year when Gorbachev came into office, and then there were these peace summits between him and Reagan. In 91, the Cold War ended. Around 85, we started what I'll call our second empire, and that was predicated on investment in defense technology. It wasn't just defense. It wasn't, the Pentagon. It wasn't Boeing. It wasn't Lockheed. It was Silicon Valley, which until the Reagan era had actually been kind of a backwater. I mean, there was, a creative backwater, but it didn't have a lot of government funding. There was some stuff from UCLA, there was some stuff from Stanford, but it wasn't a fully developed government-backed project like we know it today. Part of the Reagan administration, what they called deregulation, which really meant releasing regulations that big corporations could benefit from in a way that big corporations could benefit from, deregulating in a way that helped the big guys who were Reagan's donors and donors to the Republican Party. That really allowed, that plus government funding in the Reagan and Clinton eras really allowed Silicon Valley to grow. I mean, Larry Ellison, Oracle began right before Reagan's administration with an investment in the CIA, by the CIA. Peter Thiel, fast forward 20 years, began Palantir with investments from the CIA, which by that point had its own, I don't think it was a hedge fund, but it was an investment arm in QTEL.
Yeah.
Starting to incubate things. So this Silicon Valley boom, which is what created the AI boom, was really a defense technology boom. And that's still what it is. Now, there's a lot wrong with defense technology. Namely, as Eisenhower said, you get the military corporate complex, the military industrial complex. You get all sorts of conglomerates that are essentially dependent on government largesse. You get something like Peter Thiel, right? You get Palantir, these out of control corporations. But these corporations were American corporations. Like, they were bad, but they were our guys still. The distinction now with the United Arab Emirates is that the United Arab Emirates is investing in artificial intelligence, in Silicon Valley, in American energy infrastructure, all of these outgrowths of the defense industrial complex, I guess I'll call it now, the defense tech complex, the defense tech complex. They're investing, and they're investing to the tune of $2.4 trillion by 2036. They already had put in $1 trillion before Trump came into office the second time. And then in the spring of 2025, they put in another 1.4 trillion. They committed this funding. Now, the UAE is a foreign nation. Most of us think of it as, well, it's the Gulf state. You know, it's something over there. Has, I think, 11 million people.
I thought it was Saudi Arabia for the longest time, to be honest.
Well, that's the thing. You can't really, part of the danger here is you can't really tell the difference. I mean, many people know, the UAE is kind of like Singapore or Japan. The UAE is something else entirely. The UAE is, and this is Hunter Durensis' title at the Libertarian Institute, I thought it was great, it's a Frankenstein monster. Around the time, it was founded in 1969 and then 1971 through a coalition of 7 small emirates. It's called the United Arab Emirates. There were 7 very small kingdoms that then united. And they united because the British had pulled out of the region and they knew they had a bunch of oil, but they knew they couldn't leverage the oil unless they banded together. And they banded together under the sheikh of the largest emirate, which is Abu Dhabi. And second is Dubai. And the sheikh of Abu Dhabi was the ruler until 2004, where he was de facto succeeded by the current sheikh, Sheikh Mohammed. And the first sheikh, Sheikh Zayed, the guy who founded it, he did a really good oil business. He used it to pour money into modernizing cities. But he sort of stayed in the Arab world. You know, he was collaborative with the 6 other emirates that formed the United Arab Emirates. He was good to the Palestinians. You know, at the time it was called Pan-Arabism or, Arab nationalism, or Pan-Arab nationalism. That's Zayed, who died in 2004. His son, Sheikh Mohammed, has done something very different. He's kept using the oil money, but he's used the oil money in ways that isolate him from the rest of the Middle East, including, by the way, Saudi Arabia, which you can find in the piece, and puts him into bed with Israel and America. And the way this happened is right when Zayed died and Mohammed came to de facto power. His brother was technically in power, but he was sick. When Mohammed became the de facto ruler of the Emirates, we had just invaded Iraq. We needed help. We needed bases. We needed intelligence. Mohammed provided us those things. At the same time, he started putting oil money to building an air force, which CENTCOM, the commander of CENTCOM, called the best air force in the region. Jim Mattis, the former defense secretary, called the UAE by the 2010s Little Sparta. So, he was starting to build up a military that would welcome an American presence, that would have bases, that could give us intelligence, that could maybe do missions. He started welcoming in mercenaries. For example, Eric Prince, literally Eric Prince, after he got kicked out of Iraq, to do domestic security. And he started getting very close when it comes to surveillance technology and surveillance with Israel. He started it by doing quiet deals with private Israeli defense contractors helmed by former people from the Mossad. And then within just a couple of years, he started doing, he expanded what were essentially security operations, Air Force operations, into surveillance operations, so that today, Dubai and Abu Dhabi, which are giant cities in the Emirates, heavily surveilled, cameras on all the streets. Those cameras are provided by Israeli intelligence. So the key to Mohammed's realm, his security realm in his biggest cities, the ones that Iran have been bombing, were provided by Israel. By the late 2010s, Israel and the United Arab Emirates were teaming up in all of these places, essentially to fight what they said were Islamist movements, so radical Islam. Really, in a lot of places, it was the Muslim Brotherhood, which is a Muslim party that was democratically elected in places like Egypt and Tunisia. Muhammad didn't like that. Israel didn't like that. They don't want democratically elected Muslim parties. They want essentially what Muhammad is, which is an authoritarian Muslim ruler. You know, there's no democracy. You give your people a decent standard of life, but you surveil the hell out of them, you know, and you don't encourage democracy because in Israel's view and Muhammad's view, that just encourages Islam. And they made these sort of subtle or direct interventions against what they saw as Islam is the dangers of Islam in Tunisia, in Egypt, in Libya, in Qatar, in Yemen, to the point where at this point, Saudi Arabia has begun to be concerned. Saudi Arabia was initially an ally, and now they're looking at this and they're saying, well, Israel and the UAE, you're remaking the entire Middle East. What are you doing? You're remaking Africa. We're going to make more terrorists. Stop doing this. That has been going on for the last 10 years. So first you have 2004 to 2014, roughly, the oil translates into military and surveillance. Then 2014 to 2024, roughly, the military surveillance and the cooperation with Israel and America with Iraq translates into these attempts with Israel to remake the region. Middle East, North Africa. Now it's gone a step further, which is the UAE is using the money that they get from oil and from the resources they then extract from Africa after having intervened in these countries and installing friendly regimes. They're using these resources, the money they get, to invest in American artificial intelligence, in American infrastructure, in Chicago parking meters, I mean, in any number of things. And I mean, we hear a lot about this, right? Like we hear about how people don't like data centers because they use a bunch of energy and it's a bunch of corporations coming into a West Virginia town. Well, American corporations are bad enough. How do we feel about the United Arab Emirates? I mean, these guys have a really, really, really bad track record when it comes to human rights. And by human rights, I don't mean something woo-woo. I mean putting civilians, Emirati civilians, visitors from other countries into prison with no trial, with no due process. You know, models come there, they go to a party, they're found paralyzed the next day because they've fallen off a building and nobody investigates. You know, Dubai is heavily surveilled, so is Abu Dhabi, but they don't use the surveillance of powerful people doing bad things. They use it to keep their citizens in line. And there's actually an entire nonprofit that's been operative for 18 years by a wonderful woman named Rada Sterling, who I know a very little bit, called Detained in Dubai, that deals with mainly Westerners who are detained in Dubai for no reason, or for an invented reason, or because an ex-spouse with a grudge made up a complaint who didn't even live there, but he paid the Emiratis money. She's helped, I think this figure is right, it's in the piece, 25,000 people in 18 years, or 20,000 people. I mean, this is an enormous amount, and it's largely kept out of the headlines. if you look at all of the headlines from, the recent war, and I mean, I've saved these on on one of my email drafts. I do it old school. I look at an interesting article and I save it. If you look at the headlines from the Wall Street Journal, the Washington Post, the New York Times, and I mean, multiple ones over and over, Dubai, a glittering cosmopolitan capital, comes under, assault from Iran. Well, Dubai isn't a glittering cosmopolitan capital. Dubai is a playground for rich people to do bad things and essentially de facto slave labor to serve them, and that applies to the rest of the Emirates. I mean, there's a lot of information in this piece and in the piece that about the labor abuses on energy projects, the labor abuses in oil fields, with the way they treat former contractors, weapons contractors who they don't like, the way they treat their own princesses, the way the royal family, a couple of princesses tried to leave the United Arab Emirates, couldn't leave, tried to escape, and two of them actually did, and they were kidnapped on British soil and in international waters by the Emiratis and brought back. And so I think we really need to think, and that's not to mention what I mentioned in the last show, which is the civil wars that these people are funding so that they can extract precious minerals in the Congo and in Sudan. These are the people we're bringing into our country.
Yeah. I mean, it's concerning that as you're mentioning this, I'm kind of putting the pieces together. I mean, not to bring everything back to the Jays all the time, but we're going to get to this other piece. And it's like I'm connecting the dots already. It's like they have these smart cities, these industrialized areas where they kind of push out the indigent population or whatever to have their good people, and that's essentially what happened over in some of these Middle East. You said they literally, Israel was helping them create their major cities, and now they're overlaying. So it kind of sounds almost as like this. They're putting in the initial. Because if I'm going to be conspiratorial and speculative, it sounds like they're putting a lot of money into AI. And if I'm going to imagine a project to do a similar such thing in, certain centers in the United States and, getting the population to a point to where, something like this could take root, you would probably have to, have these sort of AI security. So essentially almost like putting in the initial groundwork and being in a spot to where they were the financiers. So obviously I would assume there comes with some sort of leverage. I mean, maybe I'm being too kooky here, but it's like, what else do they have to gain? I guess maybe they have stocks and stuff, perhaps. It's just an economic decision, perhaps. But if I'm going to be a little more sinister about it, because I guess me being a Luddite as well, I don't really have particular crazy hopes that AI is going to boom off like that. If anything, I guess I'm more cynical, and I think the government is really in a position where they're trying to centralize. All the governments are kind of an AI race because they want to be kind of lead the fore and try to outpace the actual true free market, and then that way they have this in their hands. It's more of a, and when it comes to something like a surveillance thing, I guess I'm kind of getting in, it's almost like they're trying to demolish our civilization in a certain sense and pave way for whatever the next thing is, kind of in a kind of almost like the projects in these third world countries, but maybe looking at it a little bit different sort of thing. I don't know. Maybe I'm being too nutty here.
Well, I don't think you are. First of all, I actually just stopped to write down. You have great phrases that stick in my mind. To outpace the free market. That's exactly what they're trying to do. There's a show I like a lot about Wall Street, Margin Call, and in it, Jeremy Irons plays this head banker, and he says, what have I told you about winning in this business? You either have to be first, you have to be smartest, or you have to cheat. We've got pretty smart people in this building, but so do other people. And I don't cheat. So what do? You get there first by fair means or foul. And the whole show is about they realize the market's going to tank. So they sell a bunch of stocks that they know are worthless, which is legal, but shouldn't be legal and is completely unethical, right? And it shouldn't be legal. It's based on the fact that these corporations, the corporation in the movie, donate to politicians to change certain laws, to make regulations certain looser so that they know they can do something like this if push comes to shove. And that's what's happened with AI. And I don't think there needs to be, I mean, you said Jays. I think we can be really, direct about, I'm half Jewish. We can be really direct about saying Jewish elites. I mean, this is not, the 50% of Jews in America who make below $100,000 a year, right? Like this is a small subset, but a very discernible subset of Jewish, almost exclusively Zionist elites with deep ties to Israel. And Israel's tech boom started in the 1990s, just as Silicon Valley's got underway, with help from the very people who were profiting in Silicon Valley. And a lot of those people were Jewish Zionists who were instrumental in putting Bill Clinton into office. And so, and I've written about this. There's a piece in the Libertarian Institute I wrote in December that goes into this a little bit about how Jewish Zionists starting in the 80s really did take definitive or decisive places of influence in some of our major institutions. And one of those was Silicon Valley. And they did this via their political connections and their connections at Harvard. If it's okay, I'm going to post the piece in the chat just because I think it might be there's too much information to go through very comfortably. I think some of your listeners might find it interesting. That started in the 90s. And so these people very much got there first. And then they poured more money into, thank you so much, man. I really appreciate that. They poured more money into universities and into Silicon Valley.
Real quick for the audio listeners, that's from Iran-Contra to Trump, how Zionism took over the deep state. You can find this on libertarianinstitute.org. Go ahead.
Thank you so much. I think it goes into it pretty encyclopedically. And the result of that now is that Jewish Zionists, as I say in that piece, hold what you might call arbitrative power in Silicon Valley. They're not in small rooms talking to each other, right? They're not constantly getting together. But when something comes up that certain people who know each other want done, they can collaborate. There can be a phone call. It's not a conspiracy. It's a series of people who know each other, have known each other for a long time, working together to get something done. And in my
diaspora politics a little bit too. And it's not even exclusive to the Jays. Like I was getting at, the Indians, which I think we've talked about in the past, have a kind of their own diaspora politics, and they weirdly kind of both have their religious, religious root in them. Like the Hindutva, I believe, is the major diaspora politics that we see from India that we're experiencing over here. So this is, I mean, there are certain religions out there in the world that kind of incentivize this sort of behavior by their ingrained beliefs, and I mean, we see this in Hindu, and then in Judaism too, which it seems to be particularly religions that are more, I guess, what's the word I'm looking for? Is it proselytizing the word I'm looking for? The ones that are essentially reaching out, between the Hindu and they're actually known for their caste systems in their religion, and then obviously Judaism's not known for. It's literally a kind of more or less a by blood thing, if anything, than it really is. I mean, yeah, you can convert, but that's no one really ever hardly does that. So, I mean, that it seems to be there are certain. I mean, there's something to that. I don't know. I find that interesting that there's that commonality between the two. They're not like Christianity that is, or even Islam, to where they are actually trying to get new converts. So,
well, the distinction I make when I think about Judaism and Hinduism, and to a small extent, and I actually just finished 2 pieces on Hindutva, exhaustive pieces. I'm finishing them today. I'm about to send them in. I say they're exhaustive because I'm exhausted doing them. There's just a lot of facts. It's a very complicated, involved issue. But because it's been going on here since the 90s, the real rise to power of Hindutvas. What I think the similarity is between Jews and Hindus that I think about, because I'm not a religious expert in any sense, I mean, I have certain thoughts, but they're not something that rise to the notion of, I'm going to share them as something that I can talk about authoritatively. The similarity I see, and the similarity I see with Sheikh Mohammed in the UAE, is that they're minoritarian. I mean, Christianity has 1.6, 1.8 billion people, 2 billion. No, it has 2.4 billion, I think. Islam has 2 billion people. These are faiths that, for whatever reason, really and historically have captured the hearts and the minds of a global majority. Judaism is definitively not, and Hinduism is not. And one of the things you can see if you look at Zionism, which is, in my view, a Jewish supremacist ideology, and Hindutva, which in my view is a Hindu supremacist ideology, essentially saying we are better for a series of reasons. And that's backed up by a lot of academic research. It's not just my view. There are two key portions of both of those ideologies, religious supremacist ideologies. One is that they see themselves as having a history of being minority communities surrounded, in Jews' cases by Christians and now by Muslims, and in Hindus' cases by Muslims, who were in control in India for a period of time, until the 18th century and the British came. The second similarity is the way they define why they're better. And you can see this in a New York Times article from a couple of years ago by Bret Stephens. You can see this in memoirs of major influential Zionists. You can read about this in meetings of the Indian Science Congress, which is an actual thing, a very prestigious organization. They think that the fact that they've gotten really good at technology, that India and Israel and many Israelis and Hindu Indians have gotten good at technology and at administration and at all of the things that American empire has valued since the 80s, since Silicon Valley, they think that makes them better. They think it proves that they're culturally superior or intellectually superior, or even in some cases, with some of them, genetically superior. And so you have these small minorities that are minority groups that perceive religions that perceive, and there are a lot of Hindus, don't get me wrong, but there aren't nearly as many Hindus as there are Muslims. And they're surrounded by Muslims in Southeast Asia and in Western Asia and Central Asia. And so you get these two minority religions that enter the institutions, get protection from the institutions, get really good in the institutions, the elites of these religions. And then they say, we're better than you because we're in these institutions and we've been able to do these things. And these are the kind of people who look for allies who are like them. I mean, they're not going to be bringing in Steve Bannon that easily, right? They'll make deals with him, but they won't bring him in. But Mohammed, the United Arab Emirates, he's a perfect person for them. He's a monarch. He's afraid of Islam. He's the ultimate minority and aristocrat in his own country that's not a democracy. He's the perfect person for them to ally with because they share all of the same fears. Muhammad is afraid of Muslims. He's afraid of his own majority in his country. Muhammad is committed to technology and defense in order to protect himself, in order to make himself more powerful. And so the fact that Zionists and Hindus have arbitrative power in Silicon Valley and then bring in someone like Muhammad, because I think given the concentration of Zionist influence in both the Trump administration and in Silicon Valley, these deals wouldn't be done without their encouragement. I think that's pretty significant. I mean, Jared Kushner is very close to the Emiratis. Larry Ellison, very close to the Emiratis. A lot of major Jewish Zionists are very, very, very close to these guys. And so I think, and I'll say one other thing, Hindutvas are close to them. I mentioned a little earlier that that there were princesses in the United Arab Emirates who tried to escape, and one of them was captured in international waters. Well, the reason she was captured is that the waters she was in were off India. And Narendra Modi, who's the Hindutva prime minister of India, gave the go-ahead for people to capture her and bring her back to the Emiratis because they're forging tighter relationships. So I think you're dead right. It is not a coincidence, even remotely, that elite Jewish Zionists, that elite Hindutvas are the major players in these places in Silicon Valley, and they're letting in defense tech, and they're letting in the UAE.
Yeah, I was trying to drive at it, I think, a little bit earlier. I wanted to make a note of it. I was kind of driving at in my head. I clarified a little bit as you were talking. What I was really trying to drive at is they are also kind of supremacist ideologies. So that's kind of like with Hindutva or Hinduism. I mean, they have the caste system. I mean, that's pretty easy to see. When Judaism, I mean, there's just so many different flavors, but that is actually a pretty. When you start looking at some of them, that's a pretty constant thing in most. I mean, I'm sure maybe some branches of Judaism, maybe you can't make that accusation, but Chabad, you start getting into Kabbalah, like literally the idea is that like what sets Israel apart from the rest is that they are, technically closer to God in a sense, and to be like, and essentially with the cosmic, God and non-goop or whatever, they got more of the good God stuff, and then us goy didn't get as much of the good gods, and they got to stay away from us because they don't want to get that ick, essentially. I know it's a really dumb way to look at it, but it is actually in its core, for a lot of it, a lot of different branches of it is supremacist, especially when you get to the elites. Like when you get to the elites, those are the ones that are actually looking into those sort of things, because it's actually like weirdly kind of like a highly intellectual, religious thing. So it's only really the elites that usually dig into that sort of thing, which is concerning considering the demographic, and usually these elites are also typically well-to-do. This is where you end up with things like an Epstein class that have a pretty sinister ideology to back up to confirm the sort of things they're doing. Obviously, that's not all Judaism or anything. I'm just making the idea that like these supremacist ideologies of the diaspora politics is something to be concerned about, especially as we're looking into, I don't know, the essentially end times eschatology perhaps coming true in real time. I think it was just yesterday Ben Gvir stormed the Al-Aqsa Mosque and has been preventing Muslims from being able to get in there, and is now letting this, essentially restructuring things. Now they're the ones control. So we may literally see a rebuilding of the Third Temple, which is very concerning. I mean, hopefully nothing comes of that. For those who understand that is something, which I guess maybe that's our segue into the Gaza stuff. I also think this is kind of what we were getting at, and like if they are looking to do some sort of new thing over in the U.S., like this, amorphous, evil blob of people, kind of build up. I think looking at the Gaza plan, the raise and rebuild at like a granular level gives us more of an idea of what perhaps is to come, especially in the years to come. I mean, a lot of people, as we're kind of pointing out, the economic downfall, I think, from this Iran war. I mean, hopefully things work out. I mean, where things are at right now, but I really do think it's going to do a number on our future economy. Not saying we're going to be like starving, but I just that it kind of sets up. Things can change pretty quickly, so I wouldn't be surprised in the next decade or two we start seeing something similar to raise and rebuild. Maybe not quite so barbaric over here, but anyways, you wrote this Gaza piece about mostly about kind of Jared Kushner and this rebuilding they're doing over in Gaza, which a lot of people kind of forgotten about right now with the Iran stuff going on. I will warn people, it looks like that could kick back off. If you're watching this publicly, by the time this drops, Hamas will have already reached their deadline to where they were supposed to have disarmed until some ambiguous something happens bad. So things might pick up back there. Ironically, the Board of Peace, the ones enacting this. Anyway, so we may start focusing back into Gaza, and also I think this could very easily, possibly be something we're looking down the barrel of here in a decade or two or something. What do you think, Matt?
Well, I think you're right. I think the best way to tackle this is to start by picking up on what you were talking about with Jewish supremacy. There's There's a guy in England named David Miller. I actually think you'd like him a lot. I know him a very little bit. He's given me a helpful tip once or twice. He's a really, really helpful professional, also very nice guy. And he's a sociologist. He actually does, but I mean, he got kicked out of a university for some of his work because it was too controversial. And I think a lot of it, I don't agree with all of it, but I think a lot of it is very insightful and it's thoughtful. Whether you agree or not, he goes pretty deeply into the links between what he sees as Judaism and the adoption of Jewish supremacy, particularly by Jewish elites and the upper middle class. And he's a political sociologist. He writes about it a lot. He has a Substack. You might check him out on Twitter. He's a very interesting guy. He actually has some thoughts that might intersect with yours, about Chabad and about some of the origins of this, far better than mine can, because my read on it, and this brings us to Gaza, is pretty specific in a way, which is essentially a small minority, the elites of a small minoritarian religion got really good at technology, really good at modernization project, and used it to keep themselves apart from everybody else, and then force everybody else to be like them, and then defined themselves by how good they were in technology and these other things. I mean, as I've mentioned before, I worked with Jewish Zionists, for a lengthy period of time last decade. And the people who were people who were influential, very influential, and the people who were most sort of convinced, I found, because I didn't know I was walking into this. I had no idea what Zionism was, other than I was half Jewish and every good guy should support it. Well, I changed my mind. But the people who support Jewish supremacy, the real Zionists, they're not really that smart. They're not, if you listen to them at a dinner table, and I did, you wouldn't think they were very smart people. You would think they would very good at narrow things, like reading an investment chart or something narrow in tech. And that's who they are. They're people who got a lot of success, who say, well, I am this way, my religion is this way, this defines me, we're better. And because we're a small number of people, I think that's at least some of the logic. Everybody has to we can't afford to let other people live their own lives. And the reason all of this is a little bit abstract, but it gets very concrete with Gaza, because Jared Kushner's plan for Gaza is to make it like Abu Dhabi or like Dubai, a city of glittering towers with wealthy, 1%, and then white collar workers who work under them, like lawyers and doctors, and then a big service class driving Ubers. It's a vacation destination. It's Gaza on the Riviera. Jared Kushner didn't come up with that. And the guy who came up with the original plan in 2024 to do this, Joseph Pelsman, didn't come up with that. The person who came up with this was Shimon Peres, who was a member of the founding generation of Israel and a left-wing prime minister in the 1990s. He came up with a plan called Gaza on the Riviera. And this was just as Israel's tech sector was starting to boom, and the way Singapore's tech sector was starting to boom, and the way Silicon Valley was starting to boom. And what Shimon Peres said was, look, we have a problem with the Palestinians. This is really simple. Make us be like them. Make them be like us. Use Israeli investment to build high rises in tech in Gaza and make Gaza like Singapore. He literally called it Gaza is Singapore. That was the plan. Well, Gazans don't want to be like Singapore. Singapore is an authoritarian state that doesn't have necessarily a lot of religion, extremely top down, doesn't have small businesses and agriculture and thick communities the way that the Gazans do and the Palestinians do. They don't want that. Israel wants it for them. And the reason Israel wants it for them is that they think that unless the Palestinians become more like them, the Palestinians will always be a threat. it's the same thing as Sheikh Mohammed. In the United Arab Emirates, he gives his people a lot of material benefits, a lot of technological benefits, a lot of oil, a lot of nice consumer goods. He has a booming economy for the middle and upper middle class on the implicit grounds that they don't revolt against him, that they don't try to exercise democracy. This was Shimon Peres's plan for Gaza. Don't elect a group like Hamas who promises to defend your sovereignty and your way of life. Be more like us. And that's very much with Hindutva, with Zionists. That's very much minoritarian supremacy, minoritarian rule everywhere. It's let's co-opt people. Let's not let them make their own decisions. Let's invest a bunch of money and create a tech mecca and have them work as service workers. And so that's pretty much Israel's plan for Gaza for 30 years. And that's what Jared Kushner's doing. But the problem for Americans, and this is where I want to pick up on what you said, is that it's not coming to us in 20 years. It's coming to us now. It's already getting there. It's already getting here in New York, where I used to live, and it's already getting here in Miami, where I do live. And it's getting here at the hands of real estate and tech development by United Arab Emirates, by the Saudis, by Zionists, in American Zionists and Israeli Zionists. And Trump has given it a massive boost in the last year. I mean, he's been in, when he was supposed to be at CPAC, the Conservative Political Action Conference, he was in a Gulf State Investment Conference in Miami, which is the second or third or fourth he's attended since he's been president the second time. And the result of these kind of investments in real estate and tech companies, in tech surveillance, Palantir is now opening an office in Miami. Oh, yay, right? The result of this is you're turning us into Abu Dhabi and Singapore and Dubai and Silicon Valley. You're turning American cities, so this is coming to America already, and it's empowering the same type of people, these moguls and glass towers, so that's a reason we should all be concerned. Not only that the Emiratis are investing in our defense tech, but that the Zionists and Saudis and Emiratis are investing in our cities and turning them into tech meccas and bringing in billionaires. I mean, Miami, I think, has the biggest influx of billionaires the last 5 or 7 years in America. And a lot of this is on the back of technology investments. And in Miami, I can speak from experience, everybody's getting priced out. I mean, neighborhoods are being eradicated to build new developments and high rises. Older Cuban and other Latino Americans are moving in with families. So it's like 8 or 9 people to a small house because they can't afford rent anymore on Social Security. I mean, what they're doing, I'll borrow from Marx, they're making the middle class into a proletariat, into labor who the only way they can survive is off welfare or doing DoorDash for these powerful new arrivals. So you're seeing this come home to America already.
Yeah, what a way to end it. Matt, where can people find you at? We'll pick up this conversation next week.
I hope we can, because there's more to say. Gosh, thank you. I said this last time, but writing this alone in your room, it feels great to get it out. It feels even better to be able to talk about it with someone who sometimes summarizes it better than you can. I mean, in a succinct sentence or two. You can find me at oppo-research.com. And I'm on Twitter. You can see it right there on X at oppo__research.
Yeah, I was kicking around the idea of maybe needling at some other concept that kind of brought up. Because, I mean, as we're saying this, it's like, so what is, I guess, whatever. Maybe we'll talk about this a little bit. Like, we're talking about that the floor might come out of all this investment and stuff. The AI bubble might pop, but what that really means is this money's about to dry up, and it may not also kind of really present itself financially like it was going to. So, in a certain sense, isn't this kind of the infrastructure of what they're trying to build Fallout? So it's almost like they kind of. I mean, I'm sure they'll find a way to collect off of the wreckage, off of whatever they created, but it sounds like. But on the flip side of that, it's also a lot of our economy has gone intertwined with it as well. So, I mean, yes, it's will probably to some degree is almost a necessary fallout and destroying some of this hazardous, I don't know, industries that have been created.
You're talking about the Iran. You're talking about the stuff with the Iran war.
Yeah, because that's kind of connected, and kind of, it's looking like this AI bubble might pop, and a lot of this is the defense funding that we're talking about. I don't know, maybe that might be something to kick around to talk about next week, especially where it won, because everything's in flux right now. So it is like, is it gonna pop? I mean, who knows? Maybe they'll find a way to make money off this, and to where it's like they keep that bubble going. But I mean, they are heavily invested in this AI thing. And a lot of people are predicting that bubble might pop. And in a certain sense, that kind of equates to this project they have. That's kind of part of their project. So, like I said, they'll find a way to, like, if it falls apart, maybe recoup some of it. But, I mean, to some degree, we almost need that AI pop. But it might be a little bit of economic hardship as well. I don't know. Maybe I'm overthinking this. I just thought I'm having in real time. But I don't know. Yeah. Well, I guess that's something to leave it on. We can kick that idea around for next week. I don't want to stay here for another half hour thinking that away. But I really enjoyed this. We'll do this. You dropped all your plugs, right? Yeah, you did, didn't you?
Yeah.
For those... So, here you go. I'll put here's your Twitter at @oppo_research. Here you are. For those who want to support what I'm doing, leave a like, share, subscribe, comment, leave a 5-star review on iTunes or Spotify. You can find the show on YouTube, Rumble, all the major audio podcatchers, and Twitter as well. On Twitter, that's @TowerGangJose. Everywhere else, that's just No Way Jose. Search that up. You will find it. And if you want to support the show the best way you can do that with money over at patreon.com/NoWayJose2020. See in the top left-hand corner here, you can see a little QR code if you'd like to use that instead. The low level of $2, you get access to early episodes. I do about 1 to 2 of those per week. You're watching one right now. And I try to keep about 3 to 4 of them behind the paywall at any given time. You also get access to the ad-free RSS feed. You get access to Telegram, the pre-show, the post-show, and video calls, and me and Austin's weekly live call-in show, Already Dead, just on Tuesdays at 9:30 p.m. Eastern. I also give a big shout out to my sponsors, the highest level of my Patreon. At the end of every episode is a big thank you for their support. I have my previous co-host on Tower Gang, @Leonard Toad, also at Brigade D's, @ZealVRCK, @_Infinite Zeal, Tim Tuttle, @John Klebold, big fan of the show, Tormay, @Wayne Tackless, 1-800-CAR for Kids, No Free Lunch, Jack, Mark Vestibule, and Jacob Wintergrad, a Biblical Anarchy podcast. With that, guys, we'll see you in the next one. Be sure to subscribe, do all that things, and you caught the first of the weekly Wolfsons. I look forward to this going on. We'll see you on the next one. Bye-bye.